The first flaw to discuss is the warp. Just about every single space navy out there has some form of faster-than-light travel, for without it, their forces wouldn't get far in the universe. In the Imperium of Man, faster-than-light travel is accomplished by way of the warp, a psychic dimension parallel to real space. Only one small issue. Traveling through the warp is like the most dangerous thing one can possibly do in the entire universe, next to introducing your girlfriend to Sly Marbo. The warp is inhabited by the malevolent powers of chaos and their demonic servants. The warp and the realm of chaos within are corrupting, and any journey through the warp has a chance of being a treacherous one. Aside from the presence of the gods of chaos, the Imperial Navy faces other difficulties during warp travel as well, such as unexpected currents that can drive vessels off course and mammothly destructive raging storms. It's also impossible to detect the spatial movement of warp space once a ship is inside the warp, meaning that Navy crews are blind once in the warp and must trust their course to navigators. The good news is that aside from everything I just mentioned, the warp is completely safe. The next flaw is massive bureaucracy. The Imperium of Man at large is presided over by an infinitely complex, convoluted bureaucratic structure that no one can truly quite understand. It is 40K after all. In the case of the Imperial Navy, let's first note that the entire vast Imperium is divided into 5 fleet zones known as segmentae majoris. Every starship of the Navy is then assigned to one of these segmentae, and falls under the command of a Lord High Admiral whose job it is to command the Imperial Navy assets of that segmentum. Then, each segmentum is divided into sectors. Sectors themselves are massive regions containing 8 million cubic light years of space. Then, sectors contain multiple subsectors, which are collections of star systems that can be up to 20 light years in radius. Each segmentum has control over Imperial Navy starships, which are divided amongst the sectors into battle fleets. Now, the goal here isn't to break down the entire bureaucratic structure of the Navy, but just to show that the physical and logistical obstacles separating a Lord High Admiral of a segmentae and, say, an Admiral of a sector's fleet are great. With each level lower in the Navy hierarchy being eons of space away from the one above, by the time we get to the Admiral level, there is likely to be much disorganization and lack of cohesion among the ranks. The next flaw is implied by the last: massive territory. The Imperial Navy is responsible for their fleets of starships throughout the territories of mankind. This, in effect, means that they play a huge role in maintaining order throughout the Imperium of Man and must provide logistical support for the Imperial Guard across and even beyond its borders. Perhaps no force in space combat history has been presented with a mission of greater scope. Except for Sly Marbo. Chuck Norris makes Sly Marbo jokes. Both the Terran Federation Space Navy and Starship Troopers and the Colonial Marines and Aliens don't seem to have nearly the territory to cover. They occupy planets here and there, but the Imperium of Man consists of over 1 million inhabited worlds. This is almost an impossible amount of territory to cover simultaneously. The Navy must oversee logistics and combat over the entire Imperium, and is likely to be constantly spread thin and forced to pick and choose where to offer its strongest support. The next flaw is reserve fleets of the Segmentum Obscurus, the region of Imperial space that is home to the warp storm known as the Eye of Terror, the primary base for the forces of chaos in the Milky Way galaxy. One of the most important jobs of the Imperial Navy is to maintain substantial reserves of vessels around the Eye of Terror, in order to be prepared to deploy against the forces of chaos should need be. Interestingly enough, while the Imperial Guard never seems to be short on numbers, the Obscura battle fleet does not possess the manpower to maintain the number of reserve crews necessary to patrol the Eye of Terror. It is said that entire shipyards are filled with what are now antiquated vessels that were built for deployment in Segmentum Obscura. Should the need for a surge around the Eye of Terror arise, these older, inactive ships will be commissioned into service and often crewed with green recruits or ratings from destroyed ships. These servicemen are unlikely to have experience with their new vessel, and yet they are tasked with patrolling one of the most dangerous areas in the Imperium of Man. Again, this only happens in desperate situations, but the 40K universe is a perpetually desperate situation. Reserve fleets are prone to mass panics and mutiny, a vulnerability that Chaos War fleets can easily exploit. All in all, though not often discussed, the fact that the Imperial Navy is not quite fully capable of responding to warp havoc is one of the Imperium of Man's most significant flaws. The next flaw is battleships. Now, before you scream heretic, I am not here to insult the master vessels of the Imperial Navy. They are quite impressive. But if one aspect of the IN's fleet could be labeled inefficient, it would be their battleships. Okay, I'm here to insult them. Battleships are massive spacecraft. I mean, we are talking between 6 and 8 kilometers long and can carry tens to hundreds of thousands of soldiers. They are well armed and armored, limitlessly powerful machines, and usually take on the role of flagship for an Imperial Lord Admiral. But the battleships have their issues. For one, with size comes a reduction in speed and maneuverability, and indeed battleships like the Emperor-class battleship are slow and cumbersome. And battleships are also expensive to build and maintain, meaning they require cautious handling and care. Unfortunately, this means that battleships are usually only deployed as part of larger fleet formations and in the most important battles, and don't have much versatility in terms of use. It's great that battleships are unstoppable forces of man's creation, but if they drain the resources of the Imperium, more efficient alternatives need to be considered for the long-term benefit of mankind. The next flaw is rank and file. The Imperial Navy has very proficient officers. But below them, the Imperial Navy isn't really made up of highly skilled and specialized recruits. The basic enlisted crewmen aboard warships are called ratings. Ratings carry out menial tasks like hauling weapons, cleaning, and maintenance, and even fight when necessary. Ratings are volunteers as the pay is good enough and the Navy allows them to escape their desperate worlds. So it's not like they were dragged into the Navy, but they aren't very impressive either. Armsmen transport and maintain weapons on a ship and protect the crew when called to do so. Voidsmen, on the other hand, possess at least minimal training and skill and can perform ship maintenance and repairs. But neither of these groups consist of irreplaceable soldiers who add significant value to a naval crew. The Imperial Guard is defined by its specialist soldiers and elite units, where the Navy is defined by its elite ships, which is the most important thing for a Navy to have, but it's sorely lacking in terms of the individual crewmen. This brings us to our next flaw, which is indentured servants. Indentured servants, or slave workers, fall below the ratings in terms of rank. They are taken from slums and penal colonies to do hard labor aboard naval vessels. They are dragged to the Navy. These poor souls often die as a result of malnutrition, accidents, and disciplinary actions. Basically, they exist to die for the fun of everyone else, and can do little to improve their station in life. Though I have heard The Rock is going to star in a movie called Warp Ninjas about an indentured servant from a hive world who rises to become a Lord High Admiral. But I digress. Manpower is good, but the kinds of conditions that the lower ranks of the Imperial Navy face aboard vessels is not conducive to producing strong, loyal, and skilled soldiers. And perhaps on the contrary, puts any given naval ship at high risk of mutiny. The next flaw to discuss is space hulks. Space hulks are formed from the wreckage of abandoned starships and debris that have been fused together by the forces of the warp, and often are so large that they have their own atmosphere and gravity. Kind of like my first girlfriend, except space hulks don't have beards. The Imperial Navy often loses ships, and when they do, what remains is at risk of becoming part of a space hulk. And space hulks pose a threat to the Imperium of Man, where they exit the warp back into real space. The forces of chaos and even Xenos often inhabit these hulks and have to be destroyed by the Imperial Navy. And because no hulk is the same as another, it's hard for the Navy to model them for assault planning purposes. Hulks present a uniquely challenging threat to the Imperial Navy. The next flaw is a lack of intelligence capabilities. The Imperial Navy does have a branch that handles intelligence, but it's not quite clear how much they're able to accomplish. Though little is known about them, it is thought that they at least control a militarized spy network. During the Sabbat Worlds Crusade, Navy intelligence operatives discovered a plot being carried out by Lord High Militant General Hector Draver to advance his career using malicious methods that would allow him to usurp the position of War Master from Marshal Makarov. The naval intelligence operatives were able to act in time to deal with the issue. That said, this event only represents intelligence gathering concerning human dealings. Due to the scope of territory in the Imperium of Man and the amount of different species and threats they deal with, it's likely that naval intelligence doesn't provide the Navy with much of an advantage, and even if they had the manpower and resources to spy on their enemies effectively, they would still need time to communicate their findings back through the naval hierarchy anyway, sans an astropath at the ready. And of course, spying on enemy Xenos requires alien language skills as well, and the last time I checked, Rosetta Stone's website did not feature a Dark Tongue course, though they do offer something called Dari, which I think is an orc language. The last flaw is a lack of uniformity. The Imperial Navy's battle fleets share little in common with each other. Even fleets within the same segmentum can vary significantly from sector to sector. These fleets have been separate from one another and evolving on their own for millennia according to their own needs. A battle fleet in Segmentum Solar could look very different from a battle fleet in Segmentum Tempestus. Both fleets will have been shaped by different environments, enemies, battles, and peoples. This means that it's very hard for Lord High Admirals to understand the units they have command over or know how to best use their forces. Battlefleet Cadia, for instance, faces constant war thanks to the unrest surrounding the Cadian Gate, and thus is a very active fleet, likely to have a much higher number of inexperienced ratings due to the constant losses they experience, and also are probably more prepared for conflict than other fleets as well. Okay, you damn heretics, it's time to vote. So please click in the top right corner of this video and rate the Imperial Navy on a scale of 1 to 5. Remember, you will get another chance to do so after the advantages video. And stay tuned for all of our videos coming up in this series. For now, I'm American Ben, reminding you to never forget the men and women who have perished fighting aliens across the universe. Heroes who died protecting freedom. We fight on for them, my brethren, and for Argentina. Humanity first, and die Navi scum. I'll catch you next time. Generation Films, dismissed.